You can have what you want. You need only make up your mind. At the beginning of this series, I made the statement that I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, that it's none of my business, nor anybody else's business. I want you to remember that as you listen to this message and realize that what I say here is meant only as a suggestion. I've said the same things to my son and daughter because I know how important this is. I'm sure you'll agree that we acquire the skills of living successfully through knowledge. Knowledge, properly applied, is power, and knowledge is available to all of us. The degree of a person's ignorance will determine his place in the world. Everybody is born ignorant and must for a time live in ignorance. But remember this, anyone who remains ignorant has only himself to blame. An illiterate person in our society is in the lowest level of our social heap. From that starting point, think of society as a pyramid with a broad base gradually rising to a high point. We know that the great majority of people are to be found in the bottom large layers of this pyramid. The higher you go, the smaller the layers, and the higher up on the educational and economic scale. At the very peak of the pyramid, you'll find the world's most brilliant people. We may not have the native equipment to reach the topmost pinnacle, although we certainly might, but we do control as individuals where we will live between the very top and the bottom. We can most assuredly get into the top 5%, let's say the top 5 layers of the pyramid. And from this lofty vantage point, we can live well and successfully all the days of our lives. It isn't that we want to be over anyone necessarily, it's just having the ambition and good sense to want to live as best we can. The higher you climb on a pyramid, the further you can see, the fresher the air, the better the view, and the less crowded it becomes. One of the most important ladders leading to the top is called knowledge. The more we know, the higher we move. But where does a person begin? No one person can know everything. In fact, our store of knowledge is growing far too fast for anyone to keep up with it. It's like walking into the Library of Congress with its tens of thousands of volumes and trying to decide on which single book to begin with, knowing that even if you lived 1,000 years, you couldn't read them all. Fortunately, the answer to this problem is known. A person begins with a study of his language and then to his general area of interest. 2 steps in that order that can move us high on the pyramid. First, the language, in our case, English. Not one person in 100 knows that it's our ability to use our language which will determine our place on the social pyramid, and which controls, to a great extent, the amount of money we will earn during our lives. A person may dress in the latest fashion with quiet good taste and present a very attractive appearance. So far, so good. But the minute he opens his mouth and begins to speak, he proclaims to the world his level on our pyramid. Shaw's play Pygmalion, later adapted into the musical comedy My Fair Lady, is an extreme example of what I'm talking about. Our use of the English language is the one thing we can't hide. Many years ago, the graduating class of a large Eastern university was given an examination in English vocabulary. The tests were graded into groups of 5% each, the top 5% and so on to the bottom. At regular intervals during the next 20 years, questionnaires were sent to the surviving graduates asking them their occupations, incomes, and so on. Without exception, those who scored highest on the vocabulary test were in the top income group, while those who scored lowest were in the lowest income group. Blake Clark, in an article titled "Words Can Work Wonders for You," writes, "Tests of more than 350,000 persons from all walks of life show that more often than any other measurable characteristic, knowledge of the exact meanings of a large number of words accompanies outstanding success." In this article, he mentions the work being done in this field by scientist Johnson O'Connor and gives O'Connor's best illustration of the importance of vocabulary. Tests were given to executive and supervisory personnel in 39 large manufacturing plants. The results showed that every one of the men tested rated high in the basic aptitudes that go with leadership. Differences in their vocabulary ratings, however, were definite and dramatic. Presidents and vice presidents averaged 236 out of a possible 272 points. Managers averaged 168. Superintendents 140. Foremen 114. Floor bosses 86. In virtually every case, vocabulary correlated with executive level and income. Children with the best vocabularies get the best grades in school. A salesman in his 50s, who was in the bottom 5% in vocabulary, worked himself into the top 45%, and is now vice president of his firm. An encouraging fact to keep in mind, the article goes on, is that when we master one word, we find that we have added several others. It's as if the new one is a nucleus of thought around which whirl numerous related ideas that now also enter our ken. Deliberately learning 10 new words, we pick up probably 90 more, almost without realizing it. You see, understanding our language is the key to studying and learning everything else. Literally millions of people are being held back in life simply because they've never taken the time to learn their own language. Let's face it, from the earliest times, the favored class of people has always been the educated class. They've been recognized instantly anywhere by the simple expedient of speaking a few words. Our language, more than anything else, determines the extent of our knowledge. You see, everything in all the vast storehouse of knowledge has a name, a label. These names, these words, make up the language. The more words we know and can properly use, the more knowledge we have. Of this you can be sure. A person's knowledge and his language go together. It is almost impossible for one to be larger than the other. Now, studying the English language as well as learning new words, that is, learning the parts of speech, what they mean, and how they should be constructed into sentences, all depends on your present knowledge. Right now, mentally rate yourself on the use of the language. Would you say your rating would be excellent, good, fair, or poor? If you rated yourself excellent, you're in the top 1/10 of 1% of the population. If you said good, you're definitely already in the top 5%. If you rated yourself fair, get a good book on English at your bookstore. And if you rated yourself as poor, take a home study course in English. Many excellent courses are available. Impress on your youngsters the importance of knowing their language. There are probably about 300 million people on Earth who speak English as their main language. Couple this with the number of people who know English as a second language, and you come up with the impressive fact that more people speak English than any other language, with the possible exception of Chinese. English literature, from Chaucer to Eliot, from Shakespeare to Hemingway, is the richest and most extensive on Earth. So when you're studying English, you're studying one of the world's greatest and most interesting subjects. If you think you don't have time to study, listen to what Louis Shores had to say about this. Each of us must find our own 15-minute period each day for reading. It's better if it's regular. The only requirement is the will to read. With it, you can find 15 minutes no matter how busy the day. That means you will read half a book a week, 2 books a month, 20 books a year, and 1,000 in a reading lifetime. It's an easy way to become well-read. Yes, it is an easy way to become well-read, well-educated, and it takes just 15 minutes a day. Now let's get to the second point, our area of interest. Everyone has something in which he's interested. We should read about things we should know to help us in our careers, whether a person is a salesman, doctor, architect, or housewife. Once we have a regular program going along to improve our knowledge of our language, we should begin a systematic study of the field which interests us most, and which will help us reach our goal just that much sooner. This is reading for profit, and we should read for pleasure as well. Each of us should know something of world history, the history of our own country, and the story of man himself. In the world of today and tomorrow, a good home library is vital. Those without it are going to find themselves seriously and unnecessarily handicapped. Books are not an expense item, really. They're an investment, and one of the best on earth. They pay us dividends out of all proportion to their small cost, not just in pleasure and knowledge, but in cash. As T.V. Smith has written, books extend our narrow present back to the limitless past. They show us the mistakes of the men before us and share with us recipes for human success. There's nothing to be done which books will not help us to do better. Trying to live without constantly expanding our knowledge is to close our eyes not just to the whole purpose of life, but to the facts of life as well. Never before has the world moved as rapidly as it's moving today. We must make up our minds to move with it, to stay with it, to grow and prosper with it. Not just because it's the best way to our goals, but because it's the way to really enjoy living, as the skilled athlete enjoys his sport. So often a person will live in the shallows from force of habit, or because those around him are wasting their time, without realizing that only a thin screen of reeds separates him from the fine, deep ocean beyond. He can sail to any port of his choosing, if he will only take the time and expend the effort to build a good boat. Now let me make an important point. The person who knows where he's going and who's made up his mind to get there is going to make the grade regardless of his education. If an education is necessary to the accomplishment of his goal, he'll get it. I know an Italian who came to this country penniless and who still can't speak English above the 4th grade level, who's made millions. As I've mentioned before, nothing in the world can take the place of persistence and determination. But I think it's important to succeed in every department of our life, and becoming well educated is one of the most vital. What good is a large material success if a person has remained too ignorant to enjoy it or to intelligently administer it? Now, let's recap. Knowledge is power. The more our knowledge, the more power we can exercise over our lives and our futures. Think of human society as a pyramid composed of layers, beginning with the broad base and narrowing to a pinnacle at the top. Pick the place on the pyramid you're going to shoot for and start climbing. Since there's far too much knowledge for any one person to assimilate, where can we start? First, with our language, and next with our general area of interest. Two subjects which can keep us growing and interested for the rest of our lives. Remember that our vocabulary is the one thing we cannot hide except by silence. Let's bring it up to the point where it can do the job for us we want it to do. To a surprising extent, our ability to use our language, our vocabulary, will determine our income and our future. Let's spend at least 15 minutes every day reading something not only interesting, but calculated to stretch our minds a little more. Remember that a mind stretched by a new idea can never again return to its original dimensions. It's estimated that the average person adds only 5 new words a year to his vocabulary. That's not nearly enough for this day and age. We should add that many a week. And finally, realize that leaving school is just the beginning, the commencement of our days and years of learning. For with wisdom will come kindness, patience, love, understanding, and success as a person. It's almost never too late to begin. The word today in the title is meant literally. We talked about the necessity of having a goal toward which we're working. That since the definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, it's impossible to be successful without knowing where we're going, what it is we're working toward. One of the purposes of this message is to ask you to reaffirm your goal, or if you still haven't settled upon one, to do so now, and to tell you of a way that works wonderfully in achieving your goals, one after another, in the years ahead. A goal sometimes seems too far off, and our progress often appears so painfully slow that we have a tendency to lose heart. It sometimes seems that we'll never make the grade, and we come close to falling back into the old habits which, while they may be comfortable now, lead to nowhere. Now, there's a way to beat this. It's been used successfully by many of the world's most successful people, and it's been advocated by many of the greatest thinkers. It's to live one day at a time. A lifetime is comprised of days, strung together into weeks, months, and years. Let's reduce it to its lowest common denominator, a single day, and then still further, to each act of the day. Look at it this way. A successful life is nothing more than a lot of successful days put together. It's going to take so many days to reach your goal. If this goal is to be reached in a minimum of time, every day must count. Think of a single day as a building block with which you're building the tower of your life. Just as a stonemason can only put one stone in place at a time, you can only live one day at a time. And it's the way in which these stones are placed which will determine the beauty and strength of your tower. If each stone is successfully placed, the tower will be a success. If, on the other hand, they're put down in a hit-or-miss fashion, the whole thing's going to be shaky and look pretty bad. Now, this may seem to be a rather elementary way of looking at it, but I want to make it clear. And it's a good and logical way of looking at a human life. All right, take it then, one day at a time, from the time we wake up in the morning until we drop off to sleep again at night. Now, each day consists of a series of acts of all kinds, and the success of a day depends upon the successful completion of each of these acts. If everything we do during the day is a success, that is, done in the best fashion of which we're capable, we can fall asleep that night in the comfortable knowledge that we've done our very best, that our day has been a success, that one more stone has been successfully put into place. Now, this is the way to really live. Do each day all that can be done that day. You don't need to overwork or to rush blindly into your work trying to do the greatest possible number of things in the shortest possible time. It's not the number of things you do necessarily, but the efficiency of each separate action that counts. Gradually, you'll find yourself increasing the number of acts and perform them all much more efficiently. To get the habit of success, and that's why successful people go from one success to another, because it's a habit with them. To get the habit of success, you need only to succeed in each small act each day. This makes a successful day. Enough of these and you have a successful week, month, year, and lifetime. This is why I say success is not a matter of luck, far from it. It can be absolutely predicted and guaranteed, and anyone can achieve it by following this plan. Almost before you realize it, you'll have achieved your goal. In looking back, you'll realize that your success was not attributable to any one day, week, or month, but rather it was the consistent, unrelenting, successful succession of single days that turned the trick. This is the way a skyscraper, a home, or a human life is successfully built. One successful day at a time, and each day, one successful act at a time. In order to advance to the place you've chosen, two things are necessary. One, that you keep your eye on your goal, and two, that you outgrow your present size as a person. I don't mean this last from the standpoint of weight, but rather of competence, ability. Don't get impatient. Don't let the hundreds of little distractions which each day try to get you off course bother you. Pay no attention to them. Shake them off and stay steadily on the track. Concentrate on each act of the day from morning to night and do each successfully. Know full well that if each of your acts is performed successfully, or at least the great majority of them, your life has to be successful. There's no other answer. There's no way on earth to avoid it. The person who is certain to advance is the one who's too big for his job and who has a clear concept of what he wants to be, who knows that he can become what he wants to become, and who is determined to be what he wants to be. Remind yourself at this time that people become exactly what they make up their minds to become, and who never deviate from their chosen goal. Are you too big for your present job? If it's obvious to you that you are, it's obvious to others. Actually, people are not given promotions as a rule. They promote themselves by becoming too big for their jobs, and by making up their minds exactly what bigger and better job or income they're shooting for. And this is done by taking one day at a time, and one act at a time during each day. But how do we separate the important acts from the unimportant? Did you ever hear of the single idea for which a man was paid $25,000? It was worth every penny of it. This is a true story. It's been told many times since it occurred, and it's worth telling again. Charles Schwab, who was then president of the Bethlehem Steel Company, had granted an interview to an efficiency expert named Ivy Lee. Lee was telling Mr. Schwab how his firm could help him do a better job of managing the company. And Mr. Schwab broke in to say something to the effect that he wasn't managing as well now as he knew how to. He went on to tell Ivy Lee that what was needed wasn't more knowing, but a lot more doing. He said, "We know what we should be doing. Now, if you can show us a better way of getting it done, I'll listen to you and pay you anything within reason you ask." Lee then said that he could give him something in 20 minutes that would increase his action by at least 50%. He then handed Charles Schwab a blank sheet of paper and said, "Write down on this paper the 6 most important things you have to do tomorrow." Mr. Schwab did, and it took about 3 minutes. Lee then said, "Now number them in the order of their importance to you and the company." That took about 5 minutes. And then Lee said, "Now put the paper in your pocket, and the first thing tomorrow morning, take it out and look at item number 1. Don't look at the others, just number 1, and start working on it, and stay with it until it's completed. Then take item number 2 the same way, then number 3, and so on until you quit for the day. Don't worry if you've only finished 1 or 2. You'll be working on the most important ones. The others can wait. If you can't finish them all by this method, you couldn't have finished them with any other method. And without some system, you'd probably take 10 times as long to finish them, and might not even have them in the order of their importance. Do this every working day," Lee went on. "After you've convinced yourself of the value of this system, have your men try it. Try it as long as you like, and then send me your check for whatever you think the idea is worth." Well, the entire interview hadn't taken more than a half hour. In a few weeks, Mr. Schwab sent Ivy Lee a check for $25,000. with a letter saying the lesson was the most profitable from a money standpoint that he had ever learned in his life. And it was later said that in 5 years, this was the plan that was largely responsible for turning what was then a little-known steel company into the biggest independent steel producer in the world. It also helped make Charles Schwab $100 million. One idea. The idea of taking things one at a time in their proper order, of staying with one act until it's successfully completed before going on to the next, of living one day at a time. For the next 30 days, try the $25,000 idea in your own life. Tonight, write on a slip of paper the 6 most important things you have to do. Then number them in the order of their importance. Tomorrow morning, go to work on number 1 and stay with it until it's successfully completed. Then move to number 2 and so on. When you've finished with all 6, get another piece of paper and repeat the process. You'll be amazed and delighted at the order it brings into your life, and at the new rate of speed with which you'll be able to accomplish the things that need doing in the order of their importance. This simple but tremendously effective method will take all the confusion out of your life. You'll never find yourself running around in circles wondering what to do next. Remember, as you do, to live the best you can one day at a time. You need not worry about tomorrow or the next day or what's going to happen at the end of the month. One day at a time, handled successfully, will carry you over every hurdle. It'll solve every problem. You can relax in the happy knowledge that successful acts make successful days, which in turn make a successful life. This is the kind of unassailable logic no one can argue with. It'll work every time for every person. So often youngsters in school worry about a passing grade. They think of all they'll have to do before the end of the school year. They can stop worrying completely and count on excellent grades by following this course of action. Freshmen in high school and college are frequently plagued by doubts as to whether or not they'll be able to successfully complete the 4 years ahead and graduate. 4 years seem like such a long time to them, almost forever, and sometimes leads to a sort of giving up, a fear of failure. It was the great Harvard teacher and psychologist William James who said, in effect, "Let no student worry about the success of his efforts. If he will do each day as best he can the work which is before him, he'll wake up one day to find himself one of the competent ones of his generation." Student, housewife, older person, or breadwinner, this plan removes doubt, fear, and worry. All any of us needs to do is face each day as it comes, in good cheer, knowing that we have only to succeed today to guarantee our future. In this way, we'll move steadily ahead, growing more competent, more confident with the passing of every day. Others may seem to suddenly shoot up faster and possibly fall much farther and operate in spurts and fits, but it's to the steady that the rewards are eventually paid. St. Edmund of Canterbury was right when he said to somebody, "Work as though you would live forever, but live as though you would die today." Try writing down the 6 most important things you have to do, then number them in the order of their importance. First thing tomorrow morning, tackle number 1 and stay with it until it's completed. If something should force its delay, move on to number 2. But take them in order and finish them in order as best you can. Don't get sidetracked by people or things in successfully accomplishing each act of your day. There's nothing mysterious or capricious about achieving outstanding success. It's completely within our individual control and is absolutely predictable. It is simply a matter of doing certain things a certain way every day. That's all there is to it. There is no valid reason on earth why you should not become really successful in your field, your home life, and your community. Remember that everything in the entire limitless universe operates on the law of cause and effect. There are no exceptions to this. Nothing happens by accident. For every result, there is a cause. You have only to take care of the cause. The effect will always, without exception, take care of itself. Good cause, good effect. No cause, no effect. Bad cause, bad effect. It's as reliable as the rising of the sun. This business of living one day at a time, the best we can, has an almost unbelievable cumulative effect for good, for success in the things we want. Sometimes when we see a bricklayer starting on a building and putting the first brick in place, we're struck by the size of the job he has ahead of him. But one day, almost before we realize it, he's finished. All the hundreds of bricks are in place, each one vital to the finished structure, each one sharing its portion of the load. And so should be the days of a human life, and we'll be proud and happy with the finished product. Let's talk about the man on the white horse. Every business, from the smallest to the very largest, needs a leader. They have their committees, their echelons of command, and perhaps a widely dispersed group of semi-autonomous divisions. But the overall company and each of its divisions must have strong and able leadership. Contrary to popular belief, you do not raise morale in an organization. It filters down from the top. The attitudes of the people working in any organization will always reflect the attitude of the leader. And finally, this leader will always be found to be a single person. I'm sure you're aware that even the largest and oldest companies with many thousands of employees and hundreds of management people will, when they find themselves in trouble or not doing as well as they should, seek out one man and place him in the position of final authority. The whole company, the board of directors, and perhaps millions of stockholders all look to this one man for leadership and success. He, then, is the man on the white horse. Wherever you find a going concern, whether it's a gas station, supermarket, sales or service company, or manufacturing concern, you'll find behind its success the man on the white horse. This is the most valuable man in the country. He makes the wheels turn, the entire economy work. This is the man who's been responsible for the growth of the country and our position in the world. He's the employer of millions, the dreamer, the planner, and a clock to him is something other people watch. You'll find him working early and late. And when he's not working, he's usually thinking about what he's going to do tomorrow. Back during the Depression of the 30s, the phrase most often heard by employers was, "I'll do anything." Millions were unemployed, thousands of business firms had closed their doors, and outside employment offices, long lines of people stood waiting for any kind of work. It was during this time in Long Beach, California, crowded to overflowing with the thousands who had migrated there looking for work when there wasn't enough to go around for the permanent residents, that a friend of mine made an interesting discovery. He found that he could go to work almost anywhere he wanted to. Amazing as this may sound, it's true. It dawned upon him one day that the business establishments of various kinds were just as anxious to succeed as were the people looking for work. These business owners and managers were worried and concerned about the hard times which had descended upon the country, and a great many of them were looking for the man on the white horse, the man who would somehow show up and solve all or most of their business problems. But all they heard was people asking for work and saying, "I'll do anything." These people were asking for something from a man who was very likely teetering on the brink of financial ruin himself. And so signs appeared in windows all over the land reading, "No help wanted." This was a negative form of advertising, and while it kept the plaintive hordes away from the door, it hurt business. Well, this friend of mine decided to become the man on the white horse. His method was simple, and it worked like a charm. He selected the business he felt he would like to work for, and in which he could build his career. He then devoted a month to finding out all he could about this business. He talked to other people in the same line. He heard their problems and what they felt was wrong. He even posed as a man in the same business from out of town, and talked for hours, asking questions about what they felt was needed and so on. He went to the public library and read everything he could find on this business. Then he began to think of ways and means by which this business might be improved. When he was ready and finally made his call on the company for which he had decided to work, instead of asking for a job, he said something like this: "I believe I know of several ways in which your business can be greatly increased, and I'd like to talk to you about them." Here he was selling the one thing on earth in which his prospect was most interested. The fact that he now knew a good deal about the man's problems permitted him to talk intelligently. He took a positive attitude, expressed a willingness to pitch in and help the man put his business on a sound and profitable footing. And, that's right, he got the job. Millions out of work and asking for jobs, but one man who found a way to be of help. What had he done? Well, first, he had specialized. He had selected one line of work and decided that this was where his future would best be placed. Now, he had to prove himself, and he did. The jack of all trades and master of none was the man who suffered during the Depression. People who knew what they were doing and where they were going sailed through those Depression years just as a large ship sails through a storm. It wasn't as comfortable as it could have been, but at least the crossing was a success. At least they didn't founder and go down. And many businesses actually grew larger. The best way in the world for you to develop the security that lasts a lifetime is to become outstanding at one particular line of work. Look at it this way. Regardless of economic ups and downs, the industry of which this line of work is a part will continue to operate and to grow. It won't shut down completely. As long as you're in the top 5% of the people in that industry, you'll know you'll always be the man on the white horse, not just where that industry is concerned, but where you and your family are concerned also. The person who becomes truly outstanding at his specialty actually has the world on a string. Here's the man of confidence and peace of mind. Here's the man who is quietly aware of his outstanding ability and intimate knowledge of his job and his particular industry. Here's the professional. He's got it made, and he and everybody else knows it. Now, ask yourself this question. Am I now such a person? Down deep inside, you know the answer. If you answered yes, you're among the most fortunate people and in one of the smallest and most elite groups on earth. If your answer was no, it can be turned into a yes in a surprisingly short time. The first step in becoming a man on the white horse is to make one really big and important decision. It's a decision the great majority of working people never make and suffer as a result. Failing to make this decision keeps a person from ever really getting on course or clarifying his goals. If you will make the decision I'm now going to recommend, you can take a deep breath, give a comfortable sigh of relief, fix your eyes firmly upon your target, and go to work relaxed, comfortable, and sure in the knowledge that the success you seek will be yours. It's the decision to build your career in the work in which you now find yourself, that regardless of the job you now hold, you're standing right in the middle of your own acres of diamonds if you'll only look for them. The great steel magnate, Andrew Carnegie, when asked the formula for success, answered, "Put all your eggs in one basket, then watch the basket." Let's be frankly realistic. Who gets laid off work during an economic slump? Well, what gets thrown over the side when an airplane or ship is in danger of going down? Everything not absolutely vital to the operation of the craft and the safety of the passengers. It's the same with a business. Its main purpose is to remain in business forever. As long as it remains in business, it can provide a needed product or service, protect the investment of those who have faith in it, and provide jobs for those who are vital to its continuity of operation. It is the duty of management to protect the firm and the people who depend upon it, just as it's the captain's duty to do everything in his power to keep his airplane flying or his ship sailing. All a person needs to do is make certain he is a vital part of his business and industry. Those who insist on remaining spare gear must expect to be jettisoned when things get too rough for safety. Nobody, particularly the captain, likes to see cargo going over the side. But if it will help save the ship, there's simply nothing else to do. This is why people are laid off. It has nothing to do with management and labor relations or personalities, and in the long run, it's the best for everyone, since once smooth sailing has again been reached, additional employment can again be made available. Each of us must decide whether we want to be cargo or a member of the crew. Believe me, this is an individual choice in everyone's case. It's said that millions today suffer from a malady called panophobia. Panophobia means fear of everything. It's an uneasy feeling, a feeling of insecurity, and generally manifests itself as a sort of lump of fear that settles right behind the belt buckle, especially on Sunday afternoon or evening and on Monday mornings. There's nothing you can put your finger on. It's just apprehension, a feeling of foreboding. And this extremely unpleasant condition is said to result from the unspoken but realized fact that we're being paid for more than we're really earning. It's the perfectly natural and normal understanding deep within each of us that there's something basically wrong about getting paid more than we're worth, that we're being paid for something we're not doing as well as we possibly can. If we have panophobia, running does no good. We find it follows us on vacation and around the house and yard on weekends. It's inside of us, and no matter how fast the jet we board or exciting the television program we're watching, soon we're aware of it again as its fingers once again tighten their grip. There's a simple cure for this malady. It's to throw ourselves not out of a window, but into our work. It's the decision to be worth more than we're being paid for. Only in this way can we grow. It's overbalancing the scales in the service end, knowing that the rewards must follow as a natural result. Anyone who will be honest with himself realizes that he has been happiest and most satisfied after having completed successfully a difficult job. Well, so much for that. We've got the greatest country, economy, and form of government on earth. We need leaders more than ever before. But what is a leader? A leader is any individual who can help and lead others. It's the conscientious mother who wants her children to be raised knowing the rules for success and happiness. It's the father who shows by example that any job worth doing is worth doing well. It's the farmer whose farm sets an example in his area, and the small businessman whose business continues to grow and prosper with the passing years. It's the employee who has the good sense to realize he owes loyalty and dedication to the firm that pays his wages, and who discharges that responsibility by becoming the uncommon employee, the one whom the company can completely trust and take pride in. A leader is any person who realizes the importance of becoming a bigger and better person with the passing of every week and month. A leader takes the responsibility for his own growth. He's a planner, a thinker, a doer. Each of us can become the man on the white horse in the area in which we find ourselves. It's not difficult, and in the long run it's easier for us and on us than what at first may appear to be the easier of two courses. Simply fix your eye upon your goal, visualize it with every ounce of your being, and set out toward it. Maintain a cheerful, helpful attitude toward everyone. Why shouldn't you be cheerful, since you know you'll achieve everything upon which you've set your heart? Become a kind of sponge for information which will help you on your way. You don't have to waste years making the mistakes others have made before. You'll be surprised at how quickly you'll reach your goal. But don't be impatient. Know and have faith that what should come to you will come to you in the right time. Everything in the world works on the side of the person who works with nature's laws. And above all, if you should forget everything else, remember that everything about you, everything you will ever have, know, or experience in any way, operates as the result of law that is true and unchanging, the law of the stars and of the balance of the world. As Emerson wrote, "Let him learn a prudence of a higher strain. Let him learn that everything in nature, even dust and feathers, go by law and not by luck, and that what he sows, he reaps." That's it. That's all there is to it. Look about you now. Take stock of your present situation, for it's nothing more nor less than the result of your past sowing. Are you happy with it? Is it what you want? Then you know what you must sow, today and tomorrow and the next day. And in sowing, rest in the calm, serene, and cheerful certainty that having sown, you will then reap the rich results. May I suggest that you play these messages often in the months and years ahead? Perhaps at a quiet time, just before going to bed or first thing in the morning. Even years from now, you and your family will get something new from each message each time you hear it. This is because you're constantly changing. Your problems, needs, and goals change. And as they do, you'll find the new answers you'll need. Do this, and you will leave the earth a better place because you passed this way.
At many speaking engagements, I've referred to the words of Albert E.N. Gray and his speech, "The Common Denominator of Success." Years of experience as a successful executive helped Mr. Gray to find answers to the questions you've probably asked yourself. Questions like, how can I avoid failure in this new career? How can I manage to succeed in my interesting new profession? Mr. Gray crystallized his thoughts about these common but important doubts that we all experience at some time during our lives, and he incorporated them into a speech called The Common Denominator of Success. Because his thoughts have importance for every thinking person, I want to share them with you now. I've taken the liberty of substituting a few phrases to help each of us relate to Mr. Gray's remarkable message more personally. Mr. Gray said, "Several years ago, I was brought face to face with the very disturbing realization that I was trying to supervise and direct the efforts of a large number of people who were trying to achieve success without knowing myself what the secret of success really was. And that naturally brought me face to face with the further realization that regardless of what other knowledge I might have brought to my job, I was definitely lacking in the most important knowledge of all. Of course, like most of us, I've been brought up on the popular belief that the secret of success is hard work. But I'd seen so many men work hard without succeeding, and so many men succeed without working hard, that I'd become convinced that hard work was not the real secret, even though in most cases it might be one of the requirements. And so I set out on a voyage of discovery which carried me through biographies and autobiographies and all sorts of dissertations on success and the lives of successful men and women, until I finally reached the point at which I realized that the secret I was trying to discover lay not only in what people did, but also in what made them do it. I realized further that the secret for which I was searching must not only apply to every definition of success, but since it must apply to every one to whom it was offered, it must also apply to everyone who had ever been successful. In short, I was looking for the common denominator of success. And because that's exactly what I was looking for, that's exactly what I found. But this common denominator of success is so big, so powerful, and so vitally important to your future and mine that I'm not going to make a speech about it. I'm just going to lay it on the line in words of one syllable, so simple that anybody can understand them. The common denominator of success, the secret of success of every person who has ever been successful, lies in the fact that he formed the habit of doing things that failures don't like to do. Now, it's just as true as it sounds, and it's just as simple as it seems. You can hold it up to the light, you can put it to the acid test, and you can kick it around until it's worn out. But when you're all through with it, it will still be the common denominator of success, whether we like it or not. It will still explain why people have gone into a business or profession with every apparent qualification for success and have been nothing but disappointing failures, while others have achieved outstanding success in spite of many obvious handicaps. And since it will also explain your future, it would seem to me a mighty good idea for you to use it in determining just what sort of a future you're going to have. In other words, let's take this big, all-embracing secret and boil it down to fit you. If the secret of success lies in forming the habit of doing things that failures don't like to do, let's start the boiling down process by determining what are the things that failures don't like to do. The things that failures don't like to do are the very things that you and I and other human beings, including successful people, naturally don't like to do. In other words, we've got to realize right from the start that success is something which is achieved by the minority of persons and is therefore unnatural, and not to be achieved by following our natural likes and dislikes, nor by being guided by our natural preferences and prejudices. The things that failures don't like to do in general are too many and too obvious for us to discuss them here, and so since our success in every endeavor lies in our ability to persuade others to do what we'd like them to do, let's move on to a discussion of the things we don't like to do. Now, here, too, the things we don't like to do are too many to permit a specific discussion, but I think they can all be disposed of by saying that they all emanate from one basic dislike common to all of us. We don't like to talk to people about something they might not want to talk about. Any reluctance to approach someone to suggest a change in his activity, to persuade him to take a new approach, is caused by this one basic dislike. Perhaps you've wondered what's behind this peculiar lack of welcome on the part of those we're trying to persuade. Isn't it due to the fact that our prospects are human, too? And isn't it true that the average human being is highly resistant to change, even when it's for his own improvement, and is therefore prone to escape our efforts to persuade him to do something he thinks he doesn't want to do by striking at the most important weakness we possess, namely our desire to be appreciated? Perhaps you've been discouraged by a feeling that you were born subject to certain dislikes peculiar to you, with which successful people are not afflicted. Perhaps you've wondered why it is that those who accomplish most seem to like to do the things that you don't like to do. They don't. And I think this is the most important and encouraging statement I've ever offered to any person. But if they don't like to do these things, then why do they do them? Because by doing the things they don't like to do, they can accomplish the things they want to accomplish. Now, let me repeat that. Successful people are influenced by the desire for pleasing results. Failures are influenced by the desire for pleasing methods, and are inclined to be satisfied with such results as can be obtained by doing things they like to do. Why are successful people able to do the things they don't like to do, while failures are not? Because successful people have a strong purpose, strong enough to make them form the habit of doing things they don't like to do in order to accomplish the purpose they want to accomplish. Sometimes even the best producers get into a slump. When a person gets into a slump, it simply means that he's reached a point at which, for the time being, the things he doesn't like to do have become more important than his reasons for doing them. Many people with whom I've discussed this common denominator of success have said at this point, "But I have a family to support, and I have to make a living for my family and myself. Isn't that enough of a purpose?" No, it isn't. It isn't a sufficiently strong purpose to make you form the habit of doing the things you don't like to do, for the very simple reason that it is easier to adjust ourselves to the hardships of a poor living than it is to adjust ourselves to the hardships of making a better one. If you doubt me, just think of all the things you're willing to go without in order to avoid doing the things you don't like to do. all of which seems to prove that the strength which holds you to your purpose is not your own strength, but the strength of the purpose itself. Now let's see why habit belongs so importantly in this common denominator of success. People are creatures of habit just as machines are creatures of momentum, for habit is nothing more nor less than momentum translated from the concrete into the abstract. Can you picture the problem that would face our mechanical engineers if there were no such thing as momentum? Speed would be impossible, because the highest speed at which any vehicle could be moved would be at the first speed at which it could be broken away from a standstill. Elevators could not be made to rise, airplanes could not be made to fly, and the entire world of mechanics would find itself in a total state of helplessness. Then who are you and I to think that we can do with our own human nature what the finest engineers in the world could not do with the finest machinery that was ever built? Every single qualification for success is acquired through habit. People form habits, and habits form futures. If you don't deliberately form good habits, then unconsciously you form bad ones. You're the kind of person you are because you formed the habit of being that kind of person, and the only way you can change is through changing habits. The success habit for any area of achievement can be divided into four main groups. 1, contacting habits. 2, calling habits. 3, persuading habits. 4, working habits. Now let's discuss these habit groups in their order. Any successful person will tell you that it's easier to persuade someone to a particular course of action than to find someone who already wants to do it. But if you have not deliberately formed the habit of contacting those who need what you're offering, regardless of their wants, then unconsciously you form the habit of limiting your contacts to those people who already want what you have to offer. And therein lies the one and only real reason for a lack of interested contacts. As to calling habits, unless you've deliberately formed the habit of calling on people who are able to do what you want them to do, but who may be unwilling to listen, then unconsciously you've formed the habit of calling on people who are willing to listen, but unable to do what you want them to do. As to persuasion habits, unless you have deliberately formed the habit of calling on people determined to help them see why it is in their interest to take a particular course of action, then unconsciously you form the habit of calling on people while you're in a state of mind in which you are willing to let them make you see their reasons for not going along with you. As to working habits, if you'll take care of the other three groups, the working habits will generally take care of themselves, because under working habits are included study and preparation, organization of time and effort, records, analyses, and so forth. And certainly you're not going to take the trouble to learn the best approach to your presentation unless you're going to use it. You're not going to plan your day's activities when you know in your heart that you're not going to carry out your plans, and you're certainly not going to keep an honest record of things you haven't done or of results you haven't achieved. So let's not worry so much about the fourth group of success habits, because if you're taking care of the first three groups, most of the working habits will take care of themselves. But before you decide to adopt these success habits, let me warn you of the importance of habit to your decision. I've attended many meetings and rallies during the past years, and have often wondered why, in spite of the fact that there's so much good in them, so many men and women seem to get so little lasting good out of them. Perhaps you've attended such meetings in the past and have left these meetings determined to do the things that would make you successful or more successful, only to find your decision or determination waning at just the time when it should be put into effect or practice. Well, here's the answer. Any resolution or decision you make is simply a promise to yourself which isn't worth a tinker's damn until you've formed the habit of making it and keeping it. And you won't form the habit of making it and keeping it unless right at the start you link it with a definite purpose that can be accomplished by keeping it. In other words, any resolution or decision you make today has to be made again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, and the next, and so on. And it not only has to be made each day, but it has to be kept each day. For if you miss one day in the making or keeping of it, you've got to go back and begin all over again. But if you continue the process of making it each morning and keeping it each day, you will finally wake up some morning a different person in a different world, and you will wonder what has happened to you and the world you used to live in. Well, here's what's happened. Your resolution or decision has become a habit, and you don't have to make it on this particular morning. And the reason for your seeming like a different man or woman living in a different world lies in the fact that for the first time in your life, you've become master of yourself. and master of your likes and dislikes by surrendering to your purpose in life. That's why behind every success there must be a purpose, and that's what makes purpose so important to your future. For in the last analysis, your future is not going to depend on economic conditions or outside influences or circumstances over which you have no control. Your future is going to depend on your purpose in life. So let's talk about purpose. First of all, your purpose must be practical and not visionary. Some time ago I talked with a man who thought he had a purpose which was more important to him than income. He was interested in the sufferings of his fellow man, and he wanted to be placed in a position to alleviate that suffering. But when we analyzed his real feelings, we discovered, and he admitted it, that what he really wanted was a real nice job dispensing charity with other people's money and being well paid for it, along with the appreciation and feeling of importance that would naturally go with such a job. But in making your purpose practical, be careful not to make it logical. Make it a purpose of the sentimental or emotional type. Remember that needs are logical, while wants and desires are sentimental and emotional. Your needs will push you just so far, but when your needs are satisfied, they'll stop pushing you. If, however, your purpose is in terms of wants or desires, well, then your wants and desires will keep pushing you long after your needs are satisfied and until your wants and desires are fulfilled. Recently, I was talking with a young man who long ago discovered the common denominator of success without identifying his discovery. He had a definite purpose in life, and it was definitely a sentimental or emotional purpose. He wanted his boy to go through college without having to work his way through as he had done. He wanted to avoid for his little girl the hardships which his own sister had had to face in her childhood. And he wanted his wife to enjoy the luxuries and comforts and even necessities which had been denied his own mother. And he was willing to form the habit of doing things he didn't like to do in order to accomplish this purpose. Now, not to discourage him, but rather to have him encourage me, I said to him, "Aren't you going a little too far with this thing? There's no logical reason why your son shouldn't be willing and able to work his way through college just as his dad did. Of course, he'll miss many of the things that you missed in your college life, and he'll probably have heartaches and disappointments, but if he's any good, he'll come through in the end just as you did. And there's no logical reason why you should slave in order that your daughter may have things which your own sister wasn't able to have, or in order that your wife can enjoy comforts and luxuries that she wasn't used to before she married you." Well, he looked at me with a rather pitying look and said, "But there's no inspiration in logic. There's no courage in logic. There's not even happiness in logic. There's only satisfaction. The only place logic has in my life is in the realization that the more I'm willing to do for my wife and children, the more I shall be able to do for myself." Well, I imagine after hearing that story, you won't have to be told how to find your purpose or how to identify it or how to surrender to it. If it's a big purpose, you'll be big in its accomplishment. If it's an unselfish purpose, you'll be unselfish in accomplishing it. And if it's an honest purpose, you'll be honest and honorable in the accomplishment of it. But as long as you live, don't ever forget that while you may succeed beyond your fondest hopes and your greatest expectations, you will never succeed beyond the purpose to which you're willing to surrender. Furthermore, your surrender will not be complete until you've formed the habit of doing things that failures don't like to do. In the fine book, The Revolution of Hope Toward a Humanized Technology by Erich Fromm, Dr. Fromm points out that a specter is standing in our midst whom only a few see with clarity. It's not the old ghost of communism or fascism. It's a new specter, a completely mechanized society devoted to maximal material output and consumption, directed by computers. And in this social process, man himself is being transformed into a part of the total machine, well-fed and entertained, yet passive, unalive, and with little feeling. With the victory of the new society, individualism and privacy will have disappeared. Feelings toward others will be engineered by psychological conditioning and other devices or drugs which also serve a new kind of introspective experience. This new form of society has been predicted in the form of fiction in Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. He goes on to write, "Perhaps its most ominous aspect at present is that we seem to lose control over our own system. We execute the decisions which our computer calculations make for us. We as human beings have no aims except producing and consuming more and more. We will nothing, nor do we not will anything. And in explaining how it happened, Dr. Fromm says, in the search for scientific truth, man came across knowledge that he could use for the domination of nature, and he had tremendous success. But in a one-sided emphasis on technique and material consumption, man lost touch with himself, with life. Having lost religious faith and the humanistic values bound up with it, he concentrated on technical and material values and lost the capacity for deep emotional experience, for the joy and sadness that accompany them. The machine he built became so powerful that it developed its own program, which now determines man's own thinking. Dr. Fromm says, in short, that we have become the prisoners of our own creations. We've seen this in the fact that an innocent nuclear accident could easily trigger the total destruction of much of the modern world. Our technological monsters dare us to make a single misstep,